The first rays of sunlight slowly stretched across the rolling hills of Vermont, painting the quiet countryside with soft shades of gold. Morning mist drifted gently above green meadows, while wildflowers swayed with the cool breeze. Birds welcomed the new day with cheerful songs, and somewhere in the distance, the gentle sound of a flowing creek echoed through the peaceful valley. Hidden among maple trees stood a small white farmhouse with a red roof. It was old, simple, and full of memories. This was the home of 16-year-old Emma and her grandfather, Thomas. They had lived together ever since Emma's parents passed away years ago. Life had not been easy, but the little farmhouse had always been filled with love, kindness, and quiet hope. Every morning, Emma woke before sunrise. She loved watching the sky slowly change colors while the world was still asleep. She believed mornings were nature's way of reminding people that every day was another chance to begin again. She quietly opened her bedroom window and breathed in the fresh country air. The smell of pine trees, fresh grass, and blooming lavender filled her heart with peace. Outside, Grandfather Thomas was already feeding the chickens. "Good morning, sleepy bird," he laughed with a warm smile. Emma smiled back. "You're earlier than the sun again." Thomas chuckled. "When you've lived as long as I have, every sunrise feels like a gift." Together they carried buckets of fresh water to the vegetable garden. Tomatoes, carrots, pumpkins, lettuce, and herbs grew in perfect rows. Emma watered each plant carefully. "Plants don't grow because someone rushes them," her grandfather often said. "They grow because someone cares for them every day." Emma never forgot those words. After finishing the garden, they walked toward the nearby pasture where 3 gentle sheep grazed peacefully beside a small wooden fence. Daisy, their friendly golden retriever, happily ran around chasing butterflies while Emma laughed. Breakfast was simple: warm homemade bread, fresh honey collected from their own beehives, scrambled eggs, and apple tea made from dried apples gathered during autumn. There was no television playing in the background, no phones on the table, only conversation, only smiles, only peace. After breakfast, Emma packed a basket filled with fresh vegetables, homemade bread, and strawberry jam. Every Wednesday she visited Mrs. Eleanor, an elderly widow who lived alone across the valley. The walk itself felt magical. Sunlight filtered through tall maple trees. Tiny squirrels raced across fallen logs. Bluebirds perched on wooden fences. The breeze carried the scent of wildflowers everywhere. Emma never hurried. She believed beautiful places should never be rushed. When she arrived, Mrs. Eleanor greeted her with the brightest smile. "My favorite visitor," she whispered. Emma hugged her gently. "I brought your favorite strawberry jam." Mrs. Eleanor laughed. "And I baked blueberry pie." The two spent the morning talking about old memories, changing seasons, and simple dreams. Before leaving, Emma noticed Mrs. Eleanor struggling to carry firewood. Without saying anything, she quietly stacked every piece neatly beside the fireplace. Mrs. Eleanor watched from the porch. "You always help without being asked." Emma smiled softly. "Grandpa says kindness should arrive before people need it." Mrs. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "The world needs more hearts like yours." Emma simply smiled. Helping others never felt like work. It simply felt right. As noon approached, the village market slowly came alive. Small wooden stalls lined the quiet street. Fresh flowers, homemade pies, handmade blankets, local honey, fresh vegetables. Children laughed while running between market stands. An old musician played soft melodies on his violin beneath a giant oak tree. Nobody seemed interested in making money as quickly as possible. People were there because they loved creating things with their hands. Grandfather Thomas sold fresh maple syrup while Emma helped neighbors arrange flowers. A young boy accidentally dropped an entire basket of apples. Before he could panic, nearly everyone nearby stopped what they were doing. Within seconds, dozens of hands gathered every apple. Nobody asked who was responsible. Nobody complained. Helping one another was simply normal. The boy smiled with relief. "Thank you." An elderly farmer placed a hand on his shoulder. "In this village," he said gently, "we don't let anyone carry problems alone." Those words stayed with Emma all afternoon. After the market closed, Emma walked toward the small creek behind the hills. She removed her shoes and dipped her feet into the cool water. Dragonflies floated above the surface. Tiny fish swam between smooth stones. Clouds drifted lazily across the blue sky. For a while, nothing happened, and somehow, that was the most beautiful part. She closed her eyes. The wind moved softly through the trees. Leaves whispered quietly. Water flowed endlessly. Nature never hurried, yet everything was exactly where it belonged. Emma often wondered why people in big cities seemed so busy. Why did everyone rush? Why were people always looking for something bigger? Standing beside the quiet creek, she realized something. Maybe happiness wasn't waiting somewhere far away. Maybe it had been here all along. Maybe people simply walked too fast to notice it. As afternoon sunlight turned warmer, Emma returned home carrying a basket filled with wildflowers. She placed them inside old glass jars around the farmhouse. Instantly the little home felt brighter. Grandfather Thomas smiled. "You always know how to make a house feel alive." Emma laughed. "Flowers are happy without trying." Thomas nodded. "Just like kind people." That evening, neighbors gathered near the village barn for their weekly community dinner. Everyone brought something they had made. Fresh bread, corn soup, apple pie, roasted vegetables, homemade cheese. Nobody cared whose meal was the best. Sharing mattered more than impressing. Children played tag beneath glowing lanterns while adults told stories that echoed with laughter. As the golden sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emma looked around at every smiling face. She quietly whispered to herself, "I hope this place never changes." Grandfather Thomas overheard her. He smiled gently but said nothing. Instead, he looked toward the distant hills where the first evening stars were beginning to appear. Deep inside, he knew that every peaceful place eventually faced change. But he also believed, if kindness stayed alive in peoples, the next morning arrived even more quietly than the last. A silver mist floated over the hills, wrapping the fields in a blanket of calm. The birds sang as they always did, but Emma noticed something different in the air. It wasn't fear or sadness. It was simply the feeling that life was about to change. Grandfather Thomas stood on the porch with a warm cup of tea, watching the sunrise. "Every season teaches us something," he said softly. Emma smiled as she joined him. "And what does this season teach?" Thomas looked across the valley before answering. "That nothing beautiful stays the same forever, but beautiful memories never leave." Emma didn't fully understand his words, but she remembered them. The village slowly woke up. Farmers opened their barns, children rode their bicycles down quiet roads, and neighbors greeted one another with cheerful smiles. Everything seemed peaceful. Yet, around noon, dark clouds gathered. Above the mountains, the wind became stronger. Leaves danced wildly across the roads. Rain began to fall. At first it was gentle, then heavier. Soon, thunder echoed across the valley. The little creek behind Emma's house began rising quickly. The peaceful stream that children loved suddenly became a rushing river. Some gardens flooded. Wooden fences leaned under the force of the water. Several elderly neighbors worried that they might lose their crops. Without waiting for anyone to ask, the villagers came together. Farmers carried sandbags. Teenagers helped move furniture from flooded homes. Children delivered blankets and warm drinks. Emma and Grandfather Thomas spent the entire afternoon helping Mrs. Eleanor protect her little cottage. Nobody asked for money. Nobody expected praise. They simply helped because someone needed them. Hours later, the rain finally stopped. The clouds slowly drifted away. Golden sunlight broke through the sky once again. Although some fences had fallen and gardens were damaged, nobody felt defeated. Standing together made every problem seem smaller. The following morning, something beautiful happened. Instead of repairing only their own homes, every family worked on someone else's first. One group rebuilt a broken fence. Another planted fresh vegetables for an elderly couple. Carpenters repaired damaged roofs without charging a single dollar. Children picked up branches and planted new flowers along the village paths. Emma looked around in amazement. "Grandpa," she asked, "why is everyone helping others before helping themselves?" Thomas smiled. "Because when your neighbor stands again, the whole village becomes stronger." Those words stayed in Emma's heart. Over the next few days, the village slowly returned to normal. Flowers bloomed again. The creek became calm. The market reopened. Laughter returned to every street. One Saturday evening, the entire community gathered near the old maple tree in the center of the village for their annual summer lantern festival. Every family carried a handmade paper lantern. Children had painted stars, birds, flowers, and little hearts on theirs. As darkness covered the valley, hundreds of tiny lights began glowing. The village looked like a sky full of stars had gently fallen to the earth. Emma stood quietly beside her grandfather. "What should I wish for?" she asked. Thomas looked at the lantern in her hands. "Don't wish for a perfect life." Emma looked surprised. "Then what should I wish for?" He smiled. "Wish for a grateful heart." A grateful heart finds happiness even on ordinary days. Emma closed her eyes. She didn't wish for riches. She didn't wish for fame. She simply wished that the people she loved would always have peace. One by one, the villagers released their lanterns into the night sky. Tiny lights floated higher and higher until they disappeared among the stars. Everyone stood silently watching. Nobody wanted to break the peaceful moment. Several weeks passed. Autumn slowly arrived. The green hills turned shades of orange, red, and golden yellow. Maple leaves gently covered the village roads. The air became cooler. Emma loved autumn more than any other season. Every evening she and Thomas collected colorful leaves during long walks through the forest. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Emma discovered an old wooden box covered in dust. Inside were dozens of faded photographs. Pictures of young Thomas. Pictures of Emma's parents as children. Pictures of village festivals from many years ago. She carefully carried the box downstairs. "Grandpa." Thomas smiled the moment he saw it. "I wondered where that box had disappeared." They spent the entire evening looking through every photograph. Thomas shared stories Emma had never heard before. Stories about neighbors who had helped strangers. Families who had rebuilt homes after storms. Children who had grown into kind adults. Emma realized something. The village had never been special because of its beautiful hills, or the peaceful river, or the colorful seasons. It was special because generation after generation had chosen kindness. Late that evening, they sat on the porch together beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Crickets sang softly. Fireflies floated above the grass. The world felt perfectly still. Thomas gently placed one of the old photographs into Emma's hands. "You know," he whispered, "one day this house will belong to you." Emma looked at him. "And what if everything changes?" He smiled. "Everything always changes." She looked down. "Then how do we keep this place alive?" Thomas pointed toward her heart. "Home isn't built from wood. It isn't built from bricks. It is built from love. As long as you carry kindness wherever you go, you'll never lose your home." Years passed. Emma grew older. She became a teacher in the nearby town. Many people encouraged her to move to a busy city where life promised more money and excitement. She smiled every time. Then she politely said no. Every afternoon she returned to the little farmhouse. She planted flowers. She baked bread. She visited elderly neighbors. She taught children how to grow vegetables, respect nature, and care for one another. Some people thought her life was too simple. Emma simply smiled, because she had already discovered something many people spend their entire lives searching for. Success is wonderful. Dreams are important. But peace is priceless. On warm summer evenings, children often gathered beneath the old maple tree and asked Emma to tell stories about the village. She always ended with the same words Grandfather Thomas once shared with her. "Happiness doesn't arrive when life becomes perfect. It arrives when we learn to appreciate ordinary moments." Years later, visitors from nearby cities began coming to the little village. They expected famous attractions, luxury hotels, exciting entertainment. Instead, they found quiet roads, smiling neighbors, homemade pies, peaceful sunsets, and conversations that lasted for hours. Many of them said the same thing before leaving. "I haven't felt this peaceful in years." Emma would smile warmly. "The village didn't change you. It simply reminded you of who you already were." As another sunset painted the Vermont sky in soft shades of gold and crimson, Emma stood on the same porch where she had watched countless mornings with her grandfather. The breeze carried the scent of pine trees. The birds slowly returned to their nests. The creek flowed gently as if it had never known a storm. She closed her eyes. The world was still moving. Cities were still rushing. People were still chasing tomorrow. But here, in this little corner of America, life still whispered the same beautiful lesson. Slow down. Notice the sunrise. Share your meal. Help your neighbor. Protect nature. Love your family. And never forget that the richest life is often the simplest one. As the first stars appeared above the peaceful valley, the lights inside the little farmhouse glowed warmly once again. Another beautiful day had come to an end. And tomorrow, the sun would rise over the quiet village once more, bringing with it another chance to live simply, love deeply, and find happiness in the smallest moments. Hearts, home would never truly disappear.